Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Limestone Lowdown. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Deas, who's running for U.S. Senate.
Yeah, yeah.
So we just had a nice little chat, got to really know each other.
Hmm.
I think this kind of started from your Facebook post that
Yeah,
kind of got a lot of attention.
yeah.
So kind of based off that, we put together some questions, right? So
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about just briefly about why you're wanting to run for Senate and about the post that Jared's talking about? Because we reached out to you because, again, we're not running for Senate, but a lot of things that you said in that post really resonated and made like a light bulb go off because we've experienced and seen some of that paper trail that like you're talking about. Like we see
yeah,
the connections, we see how everybody within this state is so intertwined with one another.
Yes, and just real quick for the post, which post specifically? I've posted so many things.
Sorry, the one where you started with like connecting the dots with Yellowhammer and Jared Hudson.
Okay, good. All right, so my name's Dr. Deas. I'm a heart surgeon. I'm from Mobile, Alabama, born and raised for 20 years there. And then I went to Vanderbilt for biomedical engineering for 4 years. And then I went to UAB where I met my wife for medical school for 4 years. And then we live in Hoover right now. And then I went to Emory in Atlanta for 7 years for heart surgery training. The last 9 weeks of my original graduation date, I was terminated. Before that, over years of time, they knew Emory University, did Emory Healthcare, knew about some malpractice cases where I was a witness inside. I was the first assistant, the surgeon across the table from the attending, and we were operating, and I saw two malpractice cases. One was where the wrong valve was placed in the wrong hole, and then the other one, an important scan was not gotten, and my attending opened that person up, and that diagnosis was not there. So we opened up someone who was completely fine, other than myocarditis, which was treated with medicine after the surgery. And so he got a full sternotomy with a bunch of wires in his chest for the rest of his life. And we should have gotten that other scan, which I asked for, and I was told no. Because of that, and they lost a case about half a year prior. They lost the largest case they've ever lost was $40 million. It was another heart surgery case. And that led to the downgrade of their credit rating, where they were put on watch. And if they knew that if they lost any other cases, that would take a huge hit to their financial system. Emory Healthcare, if you look at their IRS taxes, they've been running at a negative margin since 2013. Emory University, because of the NIH funding, which we get $660 million a year, plus financial aid for the university students, props up that collective number to where when they file collectively, and it's in the positive margin, and it makes it look like Emory Healthcare is doing good when they're not. So they're financially hurting, and they were bleeding money, and I was a threat, and they fired me for it. I went to my politicians, Senator Britt, Senator Tuberville, Representative or Congressman Palmer, and others. And initially, that they agreed to help me and provide an honest service, as anyone would be provided an honest service in the state of Alabama. And Emory got to them, and they turned their backs on me and committed honest services fraud. And I have audio recordings, I have emails, I have all the stuff. I've turned it in, and they, through political protection racket of corruption, they have scraped it under the rug. So the reason why I'm running for U.S. Senate is to provide an honest service to everyone in the state of Alabama, and to bring back a society and a political position that is respected, and that is centered in the truth, and that provides a service to everyone. Because I provided a public service as a doctor to thousands of people for over a decade. And I'm in the service industry, and I want to serve people of Alabama for as long as I can, and do so with the truth and without corruption in its entirety. So in terms of the Alabama Power, Right Side Media, Allison Sinclair, Jared Hudson connections, I went through the Federal Election Commission documents. I also went to the Secretary of State website, where you can find the certificate of formation.
Mm-hmm.
Jared or Gerard, I don't know how to say his first name, to be honest, is Jerod Sinclair. He was the one that actually formed that document. His signature is on it.
Mm-hmm.
And the proof's in the pudding. Jared Hudson didn't do the document. It was Gerard Sinclair. And Gerard Sinclair is the husband to Allison Sinclair, who is the owner of Right Side Media, who just created a formal agreement with Yellowhammer News, which is Paul Sheshy's firm or newspaper online. And what's happening is that through Lion Pack, 97% of that money was used. It came from Alabama Power, and that money through also the Matrix hired Yellowhammer, and Yellowhammer News has basically become a newspaper arm of the corruption racket here in the state of Alabama. And I can't trust anything that Yellowhammer News writes because, the Sheshy was the chief of staff of both Britt and Tuberville. And so how can you trust any article written about Tuberville or Britt if the former chief of staff is the one that owns the medium?
You mentioned Matrix. So that was something that when we started getting involved with state level politicians, someone reached out to us and they're like, hey, I can't say too much because I really don't know who's behind it, but just be careful because there's a matrix that people they do hit pieces on, and they usually publish them through Yellowhammer. So you mentioned that. I actually wrote myself a note, Matrix LLC, on there so I could ask you. So since you mentioned it, do you know anything about that? Like you mentioned Matrix.
Yes, the Matrix has been in existence at least since 1999. It's been there for basically 3 decades, maybe even longer. But the Matrix is basically this consulting firm that is really housed out of Tuscaloosa, and they've acquired Paul Sheshy. Paul Sheshy is my age. I'm about to be 35 years old. We graduated high school the same year in 2010. So he's been with them for a while now. But the Matrix, does the dirty work and does it through different shell companies and LLCs to hide the dirty work, quote unquote, technically legally, but it's not because of the way that the money is laundered through different PACs and different LLCs. The Matrix, does these hit pieces on people that don't agree with the establishment. And, like I said, Jared Hudson, he is backed by Yellowhammer News. He's backed by Right Side Media, and that is Sheshy. So if that is what it is, which is true, because the devil's in that Secretary of State document where Gerard Sinclair is the one that created legally Jared Hudson for Alabama. He's part of the establishment, and Jared Hudson pays over $40,000 if you look at the FEC documents to an LLC in Maryland. It used to be in Chevy Chase, Maryland. It's in another address now, but it's in Maryland. He pays them $40,000 to brand his campaign as grassroots. This guy that owns this company in Maryland is the grassroots guy. It would be the same thing as, if I wanted to, be some hunter, in Canada and be this, get mossy oak to stamp mossy oak all over me and be this, sharpshooter in Canada. I mean, it's the same thing. He's not grassroots. He has an empire of basically presidential level backing because he has the same bank chain bridge bank in McLean, Virginia, as Donald Trump has, as Britt has. He has the same consultant as Tuberville. And Jared Hudson announced his campaign the day after Tuberville said he was running for governor, and they have the same consultant. So this guy didn't come from, Etowah County and, he's Mr. Grassroots. This guy was handpicked for the establishment to do exactly what he's told.
Claiming to be like this grassroots, because that's one of the things that, I told you, like, I initially liked him. I did not want our current attorney general to win Senate. And so my husband Jared was like, you're going to have to vote for Barry Moore because we cannot have Steve Marshall win. And so I was like, but I really like Jared Hudson. And so again, because I told you like the connections that were there and
the story,
you know what I mean?
It is a great story.
Well,
but
really
it goes
does.
back to something that one of our good friends said. Your neighbors are great people, and until you start investigating them, and then sometimes you find something that's like, woo.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing. It's like you're saying, great on paper, but
And for the people,
story don't add up when you start.
and for the people that don't do the deep dive,
yeah,
they're like, oh my gosh, he's a Navy SEAL. He's true grassroots. And I'm sure that based on all of your research, you've looked at his campaign donations, and they're probably not all grassroots donations. He's probably getting a lot of outside money, right?
Majority.
Yeah.
Yes, majority outside money. There's two facts that I'm actually going to tell y'all for the first time publicly that I was waiting, but I'd like to tell y'all is that part of my securities fraud disclosure that I made that's on my Facebook page that people can look at that deals with Emory. There are current 6 U.S. senators that money laundered money from Birmingham to Montana and from Montana to Washington, D.C., which that money went to Club for Growth, and then Club for Growth endorsed Tuberville. So Tuberville was endorsed governor by Club for Growth at the same time that I was being retaliated against, and Emory and entities within Alabama came together and helped corroborate that. And 2 of the 6 senators are Tim Sheehy, who is also a former Navy SEAL in Montana, and Mark Wayne Mullen as well, another Special Forces person. Mark Wayne Mullen and Tim Sheehy are the only 2 people that have endorsed Jared Hudson. So 2 people that have committed money laundering are endorsing Jared Hudson, who
Mark Wayne, he
just moved on up, didn't he?
Yes, and it's sad because I've turned in a lot of material on both of those people, and it's just sad that that's what's happening. Also, the second thing, Steve Marshall, he has provided money to Cardinal Consultant Group, or Cardinal Consulting Group, which is Paul Shashy's new consulting group that changed its name. They changed their name last year prior to the start of this new election season. But people need to look at the FEC documents and also state documents, because there's several people running for office in this state. Some of them I'm not even going to name today, but you need to look. They're running for these offices, and they're paying Paul Shashy's firm to help run their campaign, and Steve Marshall's one of them. So I haven't even started with Steve Marshall, but there's going to be a lot that's going to come out on him, very soon.
Well, so talk about his complaints, the FEC.
Yes. Well, we're going to skip to that one. So you filed an FEC complaint. Without getting too technical, can you explain what you're asking regulators to look into, and what is a fair outcome? What would a fair outcome be, in your opinion?
Yes. So with the FEC, these are textbook violations that were made. Essentially, they're redistributing money. For instance, if you look at $10,500 and you divide that up into 3, those are the max level amounts of money, which comes out to be $3,500. So you can donate $3,500 to the primary, $3,500 to the runoff, and $3,500 to the general. Theoretically, there probably will be a runoff, but in theory, and at this moment, we don't know if there's going to be a runoff. And so when you donate $10,500, a year before a primary, or even just months before a primary, and then in the same day you have 8 family members on the same day, the money is moved over into a runoff, and the more money is moved over to the general, all on the same day. That is violating the true real principle of that law, because it should be used where if you provide money over $3,500, that after the primary, then you can move that money over into the bucket of runoff and over into the bucket of general after a runoff. And that allows you to move that money over, and you have to get permission, written permission by the people that donated that money. And they're going to have to come up with that material, and that's going to have to be time stamped and dated and all legal. And so what it does is it's a manipulation of a law to make it look like you have more cash on hand. And for instance, like the only debate so far that's scheduled, which is on May the 4th by the Azalea City Republican Women of Mobile, they used a $500,000 cutoff to allow whether you should be part of the debate or not. And I sent a formal demand letter to them today. I'll hear back from them hopefully before noon tomorrow. But this is not the first time this has happened. But you can't create a threshold of how much money you've collected after the formation of my Senate campaign. That's illegal. I'm having to fight the establishment on multiple fronts, but the person that schedules that event in Mobile was posting all about Hudson on the Azalea City Facebook group. So they have a big problem, and I hope that they invite me to the debate on May the 4th. So
Wow, that's one of the things. So have you had any issues with like the Alabama GOP?
I have not had any issues with the Alabama GOP. I have not.
Okay. Because that's one of the things that like we're seeing, like there's a definitely what's the word I'm looking
There's
for?
special picks, and if you're not in the club, then it's like kind of like you're saying, oh, you have to have $500,000 or you can't come.
Yeah.
Right. They went through this period of time where they were, cherry picking which candidates can kind of get through and not get through, and then laws were overlooked. Personally, this is my personal opinion, that, I think they thought that I was, a no chance person and that they were just going to let me pass through. But I'm going to prove that I'm going to make the runoff in less than $10,000, and I'm going to go against whoever is the competitor. And, you can't put everyone in the same bucket, because the decades of schooling I've done and the amount of whistleblowing and legal fights I've had for over 2 years, they just mess with the wrong person, and they're going to find out.
Yeah. No, I highly respect that, because that's definitely relatable. Like that this all started by us simply asking questions. Like we didn't even know the fight that we were getting into, and basically the arrogance and the smugness of our like local government, when basically it was like, sit down. We're like,
Right.
okay, and then they started, making up lies about us, saying things, the rumors that we heard that was coming directly from them. We're like, they've messed with the wrong people. And so that's exactly how I guess our brand has kind of formed, because we have people every day that are like, oh, these people are crazy. These people are just, they want drama. And it's like, we really don't. We have full-time jobs. Like, we're doing this because we want to shed a light on what's going on here. And you've talked a lot about PAC money and donations. And in the midst of all of this, that we've found out that Alabama is one of just a handful of states that does not have caps on PAC money. And it's honestly a really low amount. It's like other states, like a $10,000 cap. Super low.
10-5.
10-5.
Yeah.
10-5 over the 3 cycles. I know that, so Citizens United in 2010 was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. And in that law, it allowed, these corporations through these LLCs that are formed to donate unlimited amounts of money. And so, for instance, Katie Britt, she was provided, well over $700,000 through a pact that was basically ran through the Harbert family that live in Birmingham. But, Harbert provided over $700,000 to Katie Britt. And then, Richard Shelby, provided over $2 million to her campaign as well. I don't know if it was a loan or not, but essentially she was bought and paid for by her former boss and by the richest family in Alabama. And that means that you're put on a leash and you do exactly what you're told.
Yep.
And that's why you see these votes that she does, where some of them are conservative and some of them are just way off base. And in my opinion, there's people from the inside that are telling her exactly what has to be done. And that's why, if I'm elected U.S. Senator, I'm going to make sure that Citizens United, that overturned in 2010, is corrected, and that can be done through a number of mechanisms like an amendment. But it's sad. And then Robert Bentley, around, it was either 2014 or 2016, but he allowed basically the caps to dissolve at the state level, that has allowed these large donations. So I think if you were to look on a curve, the amount of corruption that occurs, and when these caps were removed, you will see these stories and this corruption that has just blown up, and it has to stop. And so that's why I'm running to make sure that this stops.
So I know that like here in North Alabama, it's called North Alabama PAC, and that is where they funnel money through. I mean, it's Steve Raby that's over the PAC, and he's actually a Democrat, but a lot of money gets funneled through there. I mean, Catherine Robertson's been given tens of thousands of dollars, all the way down to city council seats have been given at county commission. There's a lot of money that flows through these. I mean, and you can look at one of our local businesses that's got contracts all over the state, contracts on Redstone Arsenal, and they'll go and give $100,000, and it'll put, I mean, they're down in Talladega County, like say donating to North Alabama PAC, and say in Talladega County donations. And so it's a very dark path to go down when you start connecting the dots. But so for you running for Senate, aside from cleaning up the corruption, what is your biggest platform that you want to run on for the state of Alabama?
Yes, besides cleaning up corruption, healthcare reform. So obviously rural hospitals are hurting. I know Katie Britt talks about this hundreds of millions of dollars that she helped pass that helped rural hospitals. But if you look at the details, what it actually offered was, buying these big, expensive $6-7 million surgical machines, and that's not what's going to help rural hospitals. Rural hospitals, to keep them afloat, it's not going to be because one machine's in that hospital. We need to go about it a different way. Also, and this goes with, Steve Marshall. There are a huge amount of issues with antitrust that has not been, addressed here in our state, and the Huntsville Health Crestwood merger is.
I was just going to say that.
I knew that was in your wheelhouse. Yeah. Would you like to tell us what's your opinion on that?
People are not happy about that. I mean, I have two sets of twins. I had my first set of twins at Huntsville in 2013. I had a terrible experience. My nurses were great. I'm going to edit this out, but I had a placental abruption, and it was my baby A, and he almost died. I bled out. I did it was just it was crazy. My doctor was terrible. Anyways, fast forward to 2021, I got pregnant with another set of twins, and I was like, I'm going to Crestwood this time. I had the best experience. I even had to go back in because I had high blood pressure. I had to go back in 6 days later, stay for another 3 days, and I just got better care there. But then there's a monopoly, of course, on like the pricing and things like that. So yeah, I personally am a lot of people are not happy about this merger.
So what's your feelings on the hospital? I mean, basically Huntsville Hospital controls almost every hospital in North Alabama now.
Well, they do.
Then you were talking about the rural health care. Let me tie that back to where I'm from in North County. They just bought that, and now they're going to take that over. I mean,
all the way down to Florence. Like Huntsville Hospital owns all of North Alabama.
Just make a note.
All right, sorry. So you were telling me about your experiences both at Huntsville Health and at Crestwood. And so your question is how that's going to affect healthcare with this.
Or how do you feel about monopoly? The Huntsville Hospital basically has a monopoly on all of North Alabama because there's no more private hospitals anymore.
Huntsville Hospital even owns all of these just walk-in clinics too, right? Like everyone. I mean, we're supposed to be getting one. We're working on the infrastructure. Eventually, it's supposed to come. But another bigger hospital that's already said to be Huntsville Hospital. I mean, Crestwood was the only private hospital between here and Birmingham, essentially. I mean, it's Decatur is bought out by Huntsville. I know Florence. So yeah, so just touch a little bit of that on that with the monopoly that Huntsville Hospital's got.
Yes. And for instance, if you look at donations, Steve Marshall's taking donations from Blue Cross Blue Shield PACs, but his job as the Attorney General for the state is to address antitrust laws. And if you're taking money from Alabama Power and BCBS, how are you going to actually do something?
Fairly do that.
Yeah,
you can't. And that's what I'm exposing, and I think they're very upset at what I'm exposing. But somebody's got to come in and shake things up and change things. And I worked at the largest healthcare system in the Southeast at Emory Healthcare. And, besides Piedmont Hospital, they really dominate the state. And Emory Healthcare is struggling because they have monopolized a lot of hospitals in the state. And in my opinion, if you look at their numbers and you buy a hospital, so they just bought Houston Healthcare last year, and you can use Houston Healthcare when you look at net gains or net losses for the year. You can actually use the purchase of Houston Healthcare as a way to bump you above into the black. And so in a sense, it's actually the purchase of hospitals is used to make your overall financial numbers look better, because then the real estate amount for that hospital is looked at as an asset, and then it can be used to bump you above the black. So they were in the red, you can buy a hospital, you're in the black now, and the outcomes for patients decline. There's 10 years worth of data on this, but when you conglomerize a bunch of hospitals, you have worse patient care, you have toxic work environments that thrive, you have longer wait times, you name it. And especially for both the work environment and for cost of care. Cost of care increases over $1,000 for your bill, and it will be seen once this merger has gone through. And I know it's officially been done, but your hospital bills now are going to be over $1,000 whenever you stay in a hospital. That's money that no one has. And then also for work environments, if somebody doesn't like how the environment is at Crestwood, well, they can't jump over to Huntsville Health. They're going to have to move to Nashville, Birmingham, Atlanta, somewhere else, Jackson, Mississippi, to enjoy an entire different experience, and that becomes unaffordable. So then you leave healthcare, and then that also precipitates the healthcare shortage crisis, and it snowballs. And right now, you're seeing private equity take over large hospitals, and when they do that, the bottom line is what's important to them. It's not patient care, it's not the healthcare quality, it's not the work environment. So that becomes Steve Marshall's problem, and Steve Marshall is not going to address that, and because he doesn't address antitrust laws, because he's been bought and paid for by all this PAC money.
Oh yeah, and then the corruption that he continues to cover up,
to overlook
and not dive into. I know you've got to go, but I want one more quick question. So you've talked about the polling and how those numbers are. Can you touch on that a little bit?
And
then we'll be done.
Hit your home run and we'll be out.
Yeah. So I'll do that, and then also do my closer. But so for the polls, for instance, if you look, there was Remington Research Group is owned by a company that was used for Tommy Tuberville's campaign in 2020. And I talked about earlier that Jared Hudson announced the day after Tuberville announced that he was governor. If you just came out of the woods of Etowah County or Gardendale or Fultondale, you don't just come up with this, big celebration piece of an article one day after Tuberville announces he's running for governor. It was connected. And Remington Research Group, they did not produce any data. If you go to their website, you can't find it. And Yellowhammer News was the first to report. And what I found out is that when a newspaper reports, and they're the first to report, they're the ones that are associated with allocating the funds in whatever way that they did, but they're the ones that are actually connected to having that poll done. And so now you have Paul Shashi, who's the chief of staff, former chief of staff of Tuberville, paying a group that also was consulted and hired by Tuberville in 2020. So now you have this sensuous pool of people just basically bouncing off and ping-ponging a bunch of corruption, and you have the production of a poll that is a bunch of crap. And again, the Alabama poll, the person that owns that started at the beginning of this past year, and he was Aderholt's chief of staff for years, just even last year. And Aderholt also consults Cardinal Consulting Group as well, which is Shashi. So, and then the first newspaper that produced that piece where it said that Hudson, Marshall, and Moore are tied neck and neck, again, was Yellowhammer News. So my opinion is that whenever you look at these polls and you have names named, when it says undecided or it doesn't name somebody, those are the people you should be voting for, because the establishment are the ones that are going to be named. I'm not going to name names, but there was one person that told me that works for a newspaper here in the state that said if you want to be on those polls, you have to pay them $100,000, and if you want basically votes to go missing at the time of the primary, that costs $1 million. So, the elections have got to be watched at every county level. There's a precedent for this because if you look back at the documentary that I think is very important for everyone to watch, Atticus and the Architect. Atticus, this documentary was an incredibly important piece where it showed that $6,000 went missing in Baldwin County back in I think it was 2004 when Don Siegelman was announced that he won that night, and then the next morning 6,000 votes were pulled, and then Bob Riley was announced as the governor of the state of Alabama. And Bob Riley took a bunch of money from the casinos with Creek Indians and also with casinos in Native American Indian groups in Mississippi. So this playbook has been out for a very long time, and these polls, you can't believe any of them, to be honest with you, because really the only people that can afford them is the establishment, and the establishment has their agendas. And really the candidates that aren't named, for instance, like Pam Casey, I met her a couple of weeks ago in Trussville, and she's running for attorney general. In the polls.
Jared really likes her a lot. He's like, she's great.
I love Pam Casey, and I told her I'm voting for her. The other two are named in the polls, and then the third one is undecided. They could have named the third person. I mean, that's just ridiculous. So that already goes and tells you who I'm voting for.
Well, she didn't pay the fee, so she didn't
pay the fees. She didn't pay the fees. So, wait 1 second.
We know you've got to go. Feel free to go ahead and do your.
Yes. And so, in closure, I, am running for U.S. Senate. My name's Dr. Deas. Please vote for me on May 19th. I am going to fix corruption on day one when I'm elected in office. I'm going to eradicate corruption. I don't want people to fear me. I want people to understand that I'm not going to take any bull crap from anybody, and I am going to run my campaign, and I'm running my campaign under $10,000. I'm going to make it to the runoff, and I will win the election, and I'm very confident in what I'm doing, and I'm using my brain, and I'm not selling my soul to the devil. So, I'm old-fashioned. I believe in, the politics that occurred, in the 1950s, 1970s, where, you might have had like a flyer in the newspaper or something, but you canvassed door to door and you met people and you earned people's votes. And now, if you're, a leech or a slime ball, you become the establishment, and then, you get elected office. But I'm here showing the truth, exposing the truth, and going to eradicate corruption in the state of Alabama that is deeply rooted in Alabama Power and other companies that have basically bought the entire system. And when I do that, that's going to fix, healthcare in our state. That's going to fix elections. That's going to fix grievances in the in the workspace, in the employment space. There will not be a single person that's upset with their employment experience whenever I'm in office, because everyone is going to come to me. I'm going to help them because it was done to me, and I was terminated and thrown under a rug for systems that I'm going to completely eradicate as U.S. Senator. There's so many other things I have in mind for everyone, and I'm going to have a lot of videos that are about to come out, and I really appreciate everything that y'all are doing in Limestone County, and I'm very thankful for, we're brothers and sisters in the bond fighting corruption.
The
real grassroots.
The real grassroots, yeah.
Real grassroots.
Thank you so much for taking the time with us, and we will see you next week at the Senate Forum. So
yes.
Thanks for taking the time with us, and we will talk to you soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you, and God bless.
You too.
You as
Thank
well,
you.
sir.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.